Questions over Donald Trump's mental acuity are now being raised this afternoon after a latest Truth Social post that was a little bizarre, where he essentially falsely claimed that former Attorney General Merrick Garland, Lisa Monaco, who was a senior Department of Justice official under the Biden administration, and special counsel Jack Smith rigged the 2020 election and taped lawmakers' calls. I'll read you the exact quote. Just in, documents show conclusively that Christopher Wray, deranged Jack Smith, Merrick Garland, Lisa Monaco, and other crooked lowlifes from the failed Biden administration signed off on Operation Arctic Frost. They spied on senators and congressmen slash women and even taped their calls. They cheated and rigged the 2020 presidential election. These radical left lunatics should be prosecuted for their illegal and highly unethical behavior. Now, here's why this is an issue. Not only is he calling for the prosecution of those he doesn't agree with, that's become commonplace. And no, we can't sane wash it. We can't normalize that Trump wants to prosecute his political opponents, but that isn't necessarily new. Here's the issue for Trump. Jack Smith, Merrick Garland, and Lisa Monaco were not in the federal government in 2020 during the 2020 presidential election. None of them were in public service. At the time, Donald Trump was president. It was his Department of Justice. It was his FBI director who he appointed, Christopher Wray, and it was his senior national security officials. And so he is blaming Lisa Monaco, Merrick Garland, and Jack Smith for something that they could not have done because they were not in the government at the time. Now, obviously, there is nothing to suggest that the 2020 election was rigged or stolen from Donald Trump. We've already spoken about that. We've already beat that horse as really much as we could. But this new idea that somehow Biden administration officials rigged an election that they had no connection to, well, that's raising serious questions, not just about, well, what is the president trying to lay the groundwork here, but also, is the president in the fully right frame of mind when he says things like this? Because right now, imagine President Biden claiming that, for example, Barack Obama's people rigged the 2016 election, rigged the 2020 election in some way, shape, or form. That just wouldn't make sense because Barack Obama's people weren't in office in 2020. All to say that this is just a little weird, and a lot of people are now raising questions about the president's mental acuity. And it comes as behind the scenes, Donald Trump is telling folks that he controls Speaker Mike Johnson. We're now in day 25 of a government shutdown. And Mike Johnson has really towed the party line, or really towed Trump's line, in terms of doing exactly what Donald Trump wants when Donald Trump wants it. And privately, Donald Trump, the president, is telling those around him that he is not just the president of the United States, he's also the speaker, calling Mike Johnson his puppet. And it comes as Mike Johnson is receiving pushback both within his own party, but also within the Democratic Party. Folks like Marjorie Taylor Greene on the right, and then most Democrats on the left, have criticized Johnson in recent weeks for failing to bring the House of Representatives back into session, despite the fact that we are now 25 days in a government shutdown. Johnson is also facing increased pressure to swear in Congresswoman-elect Adelita Grijalva, and as I spoke to her yesterday, she made clear that she has no access to critical budgetary needs. She has no access to passwords for even phones or laptops to be able to do constituent services, all during this massive government shutdown. Before I continue, please consider subscribing to support my work or sending a one-time donation via Venmo to Aaron-Parnas. And now that we're entering day 25, day 26 of a government shutdown tomorrow, it's coming to a point where the Trump administration has a choice to make, because SNAP benefits run out for 42 million Americans at the end of the month. But the Trump administration has announced that it will not use emergency funds within the United States Department of Agriculture to cover payments for November, putting food aid at risk for 42 million Americans. Here's what they are paying for, however. They're paying for ICE agents to receive salary and to receive their checks. They're making sure the United States military is paid. They're making sure the FBI, CBP officials are paid. Members of Congress receive paychecks, $174,000 per year. Their staff do not. But over 1 million workers are going unpaid right now, while some lawmakers and some appointees receive salaries. And here's the thing: Donald Trump and the Trump administration found money to pay the troops. They found money to pay ICE agents. They have not, they deliberately using money that they can use, these emergency funds, to provide for the most vulnerable in American society, those that rely on food assistance like SNAP and food stamps. And remember the $130 million that were sent to the Pentagon? $130 million from a private Trump donor, a private friend of the president's? Well, we now know who that is. His name is Timothy Mellon, and he donated $130 million to the Pentagon to help offset the costs of essentially paying the troops. Only issue with that: costs over $2 billion every 2 weeks to fully pay the United States military. Over $2 billion. We have 1.3 million active duty service members in the United States right now, or in the United States military across the globe. $130 million donation gives them each $100. That's not nearly enough to cover their salaries. But you know what is? It will help cover SNAP, but it's not going to be used to cover SNAP for 42 million Americans. It's just going to go into the Pentagon slush fund. But here's the other issue there: that move likely violates federal law, because under the Anti-Deficiency Act, Congress has not appropriated this money to pay the troops during this time. And so private money can't legally replace congressional appropriations. And yet here we are. And yet here we are. It comes as Donald Trump is making things more expensive for everyday Americans. We're now learning that Donald Trump has imposed an additional 10% tariff on Canadian imports after Ontario aired that anti-tariff ad quoting Ronald Reagan during the World Series, despite promising to pull it. Ontario Premier Doug Ford said that the first 2 nights of the World Series, last night and tonight, will have that ad featured. And then it'll be stopped in time for Monday. Donald Trump called the ad misleading and a hostile act, despite the fact that essentially the ad directly quoted Ronald Reagan and did not misinform the public. But Donald Trump was personally offended by it. And so what did he do? He turned around and imposed an additional 10% tariff on all Canadian goods. And so that's where we're at right now. A very busy Saturday, and likely a busier evening and weekend. I'll continue to provide you updates through it all, as always. So make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you soon for another update. Stay tuned for more. More to come